June, what am I gonna do with you? I feel like drawing fairies, but fairy year is already passed. Not to mention, I've been in a ballet mood as of late. Hmm. And that's how the concept of the Fae Ballet was born. Hey everybody, Holly Drew here, and welcome to the video. Here I'll be taking Fae from Irish folklore and turning them into ballet casting staff. I do plan on making this a series, where for this video I'll be doing a Banshee, Changeling, and Leprechaun, while for the second episode I'll cover the Puka, Dullahan, and Brownie whenever I get to posting that. So if you guys end up liking these and want to see me do more, let me know in the comments section, and if you have any suggestions as well. Anyhow, let's get into the drawing portion of the video. First up is the one who inspired it all, the Banshee. When I started looking up Fae for this project, I first saw the word Banshee and immediately remembered a scene from an anime called Princess Tutu, where one of the characters named Kier did the pantomime for death. I believe it was in a bad dream of the main character? I don't quite remember right now. But that inspired me to do a Banshee using the pantomime death. For those who don't know what a pantomime is, don't worry, I'll give a little explanation soon. For now, let's explain what the Banshee is for those who have never heard it before. So, a Banshee is a type of fairy and, in some cases, a ghost in Irish folklore. They have a few variations on their appearances, but what's consistent is them being pale women with long hair and only appearing at night. Often they are young and beautiful, with the occasional description of them being short and elderly. They could be wearing a shroud or a dress of white, black, or green, a gray cloak, and or a veil, commonly having white or silver hair, with some cases having gray or red hair. But if anything, you're gonna be hearing them first. On the night of and or after a family member's passing, even if they live far away from their homeland, the Banshee will cry, wail, and sing a sorrowful song. But if you're the only one in your family that can hear her, she's foretelling your soon-to-be funeral. Or maybe I should elaborate. Technically not every family has a Banshee. It is believed that only those with ancestral Irish roots have Banshees. And even that can get more specific to just nobility, those with a last name containing O, Mick, or Mac, or even being Milesian descent, which is an ancient race that settled in Ireland. But how does a family get a Banshee? Well, Banshees are believed to be originally women who have passed away, but sadly not by a peaceful old age. Rather, it was either from childbirth or being murdered. Despite all that though, they still held a very strong and loving connection to their families. So much so that they would stick around to forewarn and mourn for her family members and descendants that passed on as well. But in much later interpretations, the Banshee became a vengeful spirit, lingering on to the hatred of her mistreatment of when she was alive. These Banshees would shriek, wail, and cry out piercing screams, so much and frequent that the targets would go to the point of insanity. Then the Banshee would howl in delight when the person or people they hated finally died. What Banshees are also known for, and are probably inspired by, are keeners. A keener is a profession started in Ireland and some parts in Scotland to, well, keen. Keening, from what I understand, is a combination of mourning, crying, and singing sorrowfully in an inconsistent pattern. And it's seen as a way to pay respects to the dead, so it's often performed at funerals. Alright, now on to explaining pantomime. For those who didn't know, don't worry, I didn't know that was a thing until watching Princess Tutu years ago. But ballets actually incorporate mime into their performances. This type of mime is called pantomime, and they are used to help narrate the story. Which makes sense for an audience member's perspective, because if it's your first time going to a ballet, having the dancers perform certain gestures would be helpful to understand what's going on. Not to mention them pointing literally to where your focus should be. Some examples besides using deaf like I'm using here in this image are king, queen, sleep, look/see, listen/hear, promise, and love. For this banshee that I'm drawing, I imagine she was running away from her murderer in a thick forest. Maybe the murderer was her future fiancé? But anyway, she got caught and passed away. What kept her wanting to live was being able to see her parents again. Then, after her parents passed away, she found her new home at the Fade Ballet and joined them, later considering both the staff and her audience as a part of her found family. As sweet as this is, I could also see her unintentionally stressing out the staff because she and her fellow Banshee employees will float above the audience members who are close to dying, in return putting on more pressure on the dancers to perform their best show before said client's death. But besides that though, I could see Banshee's primary role in the ballet is showing up like a warning sign to the characters that a major death is going to happen, or has been prophesied. So you would commonly see her dancing in the plays Giselle, Romeo and Juliet, Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, etc. I just realized the Banshees could be backup singers too. Oh my god, haunted choir! Oh, that would be fun. For the illustration, I thought maybe Banshee still wears her nightgown from the night she was murdered because it holds sentimental value, even though it's quite torn up. With that in mind, I looked up reference in the Romeo and Juliet's balcony pas de deux scenes, so I could get an idea on how the fabric flowed, not to mention how sheer the fabric is and how it's supposed to look. I also thought of making Banshee cry blood, since that was another way Banshees were described in appearance, but decided not to go with that just in case YouTube didn't like it. Lastly, for the background, I tried to make it look misty or foggy. That is because Banshees were also believed to turn into mist if they were spotted. But for this universe, I will say they will have control whether they want to disappear into a cloud of mist or not. Because that would be really inconvenient once the Banshees step onto the stage. Everyone's covered in mist. Not to mention, that's a big safety concern for the dancers as they can't see where their feet are landing. Huh. Now that I mention this, they could potentially be smoke machine replacements. Alright, next up is the Changeling. Changelings are the children of Fae, often transforming into a slightly uglier appearance of a human child that their parent has stolen. But why would a Fae want to take a human child? Well, the most common case is because the Fae likes the human child more and wants to raise it instead, especially if they consider it prettier. So, the Fae parent will do the old switcheroo with the Changeling and keep the human child to themselves. Other popular reasons are to punish the human parents for a past wrongdoing and taking revenge, or just wanting to keep the human child as a slave. The Fae parents in question vary depending on country. Commonly it's fairies, but in Lower Scotland and Northern England it's elves, trolls in Scandinavia, and then the Bojinka in Poland. Then how would the human parents prevent their children from being stolen? Well, there are a couple of methods. Near the baby in its crib, place an inverted coat, an open pair of iron scissors, or a knife, if we are dealing with trolls here. To steer away the Bojinka, tie a red ribbon around the baby's hand and protect its face with a red cap at night. Or simply just keep an eye on your children and don't neglect them. If they were worried about their children getting stolen while they were asleep, well, that's what the coat and scissors were for. If the parents in question still had suspicions, there were a few things to look out for. First is to look at the infant's appearance. Does it have any deformities, beady eyes, facial hair, and/or long teeth? Has the child been getting ill or sickly over time? Has it been growing abnormal or cannot move any of their limbs anymore? If the parents have answered yes to any of those, there is a chance their beloved child could actually be a changeling. So sadly, if you're a human child born with any deformities or looked uglier in comparison, you could have been falsely accused as a changeling back in the day. Whoops. Other methods were catching them in the act of doing something a young infant really shouldn't be able to do at their age, such as jumping and dancing naturally or playing a musical instrument very well. And because they appeared smarter than the average child, you could try doing something that can make the changeling question your intelligence or get mad at you. The most common example is cooking eggshells into a meal. After the parents figure out their kid is actually a changeling, there are a few ways they can proceed. The bittersweet option is keeping the changeling, because they already see it as one of their own, but then they will never see their biological child again. In other cases, the parent will keep the changeling in fear that the Fae will punish their real kid. If the parents want their biological kid back, there are a few ways to trick the changeling into revealing themselves. Because apparently, once the cat is out of the bag, they often have to move back to the Fae parent and return the human child. The friendly methods are to make the changeling laugh, or making the changeling instruct you to remove the eggshells from afore. The other ways are frankly performing physical abuse on the poor child, especially the ones involving fire. Now, I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, but just in case any of you guys watching this now for some reason believes that someone in your life is a changeling, do not abuse them. It doesn't matter what excuse you use, abuse is still abuse. It is morally wrong and illegal. Do not do it. Period. Got it? You better. And also, don't feed people eggshells without their consent, because you never know if someone has a serious food allergy, and if you don't grind up the eggshells properly, it can cause serious injury. Anyhow, now that I got that out of the way, let's get back to the last option the parents would take, which is sadly returning the changeling back to the forest. Times were tough back then and a lot of people couldn't afford a child, let alone one that needed extra medical care, time, food, and resources. So sometimes the nicest and quietest way to let them go was returning them to nature and letting nature do its thing. And if the Fae parent came back, hopefully it would be able to raise both kids, and the human child could have a better life that the biological parents couldn't bring to the table. But it doesn't help the fact that this is technically child neglect, aka another form of abuse. Which makes you kind of wonder how sparse orphanages were back in the day, and the level of shame when it came to dumping your own flesh and blood away. It's interesting when researching the changeling, we don't really get much of a description of what the changeling actually looks like, but rather how to spot them in disguise. Which, convenient enough, my original idea was to draw a changeling in her human form, so that sealed the deal a little bit. For Changeling's human form, I wanted to make her feel not quite right. Like she looks human, but something seems off. A little alien, so to speak. So, I went to make her have beady eyes and tried to give her long, skinny fingers. Unfortunately, I was having trouble with her hands, so they didn't come out as long and creepy as I would have hoped. But I got them done, so that's the main thing. Speaking of hands, on her right hand I had Changeling use the pantomime Beautiful. Kind of in a cheeky way, making you second guess if your assumption of her is incorrect. As for her outfit, I feel I went into a lot of small symbolism hints in this piece. The dress is based off of Coppelia's outfit from the ballet Coppelia. For those who are not familiar with the ballet, Coppelia is a life-size doll that her inventor, Dr. Coppelius, wants to bring to life. But in order to do that, the doctor would need a human spirit to make it happen. I thought it was a little fun role that Changeling could be playing, since both her and Coppelia have fooled others to believe they are real humans. Another thing I wanted to add was something that represented greed, because it was a common depiction of a changeling. So I looked up things that symbolize greed, and then came across wolves. Then the saying, "a wolf in sheep's clothing," popped in my head, and I loved it. This led to making sure the sleeves were white and puffy like a sheep, and to have a white underskirt. Not to mention making a white lace pattern of a wolf's paw print. That way it's not too noticeable until you look close up. But oh my gosh, the lace on the skirt was throwing me off for a loop. I, for the longest time, could not figure out why it wasn't turning up the way I imagined it. Only for an idea to finally dawn on me as I was going to bed did I realize how I was using the free transformation tool. So I tackled it the next day, and it turned out much better. Thank goodness. On the skirt, I've also added pink daisies since they represent innocence. And a lot of adults seem to view children as such. Not to mention, I also envisioned this changeling to be a teen, so she does try to pull off not being fully mature yet and to not know any better. Then only after assigning the colors did I realize that I unintentionally gave her the combo of blue and pink, which are colors are usually assigned to babies. Would you look at that? Finally, for design-wise, I changed Changeling's hair color to being brunette to blonde, because I wasn't a fan of how the brown turned out. And then I remembered too, it is believed that fairies love blondes. So, I made her blonde. I can imagine Changeling is one of those terrible coworkers that always tries to steal someone else's lunch. And it's not because she didn't bring her own lunch or anything, but she ends up taking it if she sees it. And her fellow employees have complained about this as well. But because she's the child prodigy, the boss doesn't exactly want to get rid of her. So the staff have resolved to putting eggs into their lunches because Changeling has an egg phobia, which is called ovophobia, the more you know. Whether it is cooking with eggs, having deviled eggs placed in the lunchbox, or just having a raw egg placed somewhere to act like a cross, you name it. Leaving the lunchroom to smell like eggs all the time. Kind of making her have to eat lunch somewhere else. But you can be sure the vending machines are always empty. She has a sweet tooth. Apart from being the food gremlin that she is, I can see Changeling being a perfectionist and tries to be the best dancer she can be. And because she puts in a lot of effort, the instructors and staff see Changeling as a hard worker. Even though she is an excellent ballerina, I could see Changeling having a bit of imposter syndrome because she's always trying to fit into a mold that she believes that is ideal, but doesn't feel authentic in it. Maybe she could have a character development of being comfortable in her own skin and not feel bad about being born as a changeling. But besides that, Changeling knows after she retires from dancing, she would like to join the band so she can still work as part of the crew. And last but not least, for this video's last illustration, the Leprechaun. Definitely one of the most well-known and advertised fae among our generations today. But funny enough, they were only known to wear green starting at the 20th century. Originally they wore red, mainly being the jacket. Along with the red jacket, they were also known to wear a leather apron, breeches, gray or black stockings, and a cocked hat which could help him disappear into thin air and travel far distances. The leprechaun is also described as an old man, being around 3 feet, aka 91.4 centimeters, tall, and a very solitary fae, carrying a coin purse full of gold. Speaking of gold, those who are familiar with the leprechaun will most likely be aware of association with a pot of gold. Depending on source, this gold would be either his hard-earned money or someone else's that he was guarding. But either way, this gold would be stored in a pot made out of clay, copper, or iron, and buried in dirt mounds. And if you wanted a share of that gold or wanted to have free wishes granted, all you had to do was capture him. Easier said than done, though. Apart from his short stature and ability to disappear, there was one more thing you had to be careful of. His wit. Even if you manage to capture him, this cunning little fae will find a way to trick you. Either by persuading you to let him go, or make you lose the marked location, leaving you all empty-handed. But besides that, the leprechaun is a well-known and skilled cobbler, which is probably how he's able to make such a wealthy sum. He would make regular shoes, dancing slippers for fairies, and even crafting magical shoes for heroes. So, you know I had to make him the designated cobbler of this series. And he's probably the only shoemaker in the Fae Ballet. Since I picture Leprechaun being a very busy Fae, he most likely doesn't have time to teach an apprentice or assistant. Doing fittings in the morning, and then the rest of the day is making all the shoes. Probably at least 100 pairs a day. He can be quite a workaholic hermit. I also imagine him having a great memory, so he has memorized all the dancers' shoe sizes and customizations off by heart. But he has written records down in a thick book, just in case. Then when dancers come for their fitting appointments, Leprechaun has a calm and chill demeanor, allowing all personalities from shy ones to social butterflies to get along with him quite well. And they know they are good hands from his vast knowledge and expertise of his craft. As for background, Leprechaun used to be a nomad and would travel from one sheep farm to another while working on his shoes for clients, inspired by depictions of Leprechaun sleeping on top of sheep. So, when thinking how I wanted to draw Leprechaun, I thought it would be appropriate if I had him in the process of making a point shoe. Leprechauns were also described as withered-faced. Had to look that up, and it meant wrinkly face. Okay, so then I'll make him an elder. Then I realized I've never drawn an old person before. Uh-oh. So I had to look up images of elderly man and determine common wrinkle patterns, leaving me to draw the head last when working on the rough draft. And silly me, I was doing the rough sketch for the shirt buttons, the belt, and the breeches, but I totally forgot they weren't going to be seen underneath the apron. Oh well, at least I had the detail in mind. Speaking of the shirt, I plan to have his shirt in red since that was the color they were originally known for, as I said earlier. And I had fun figuring out how to apply the cotton texture layer on top. Just dawned on me that I could just rasterize, then mesh transform. Worked like a charm. And I'm just happy with it because it gives it a bit more depth. Since leprechauns are known for their wealth, I thought of decorating him with some jewelry. That way he can have something fun to treat himself with. And I mean, he can afford it. He's raking up all the dough from being the only shoemaker. Originally, I planned on giving him rings, since that is commonly known as a wealthy accessory. But because the leprechaun is working with his hands all the time, with part of the process using thick glue, I thought it would be impractical getting glue and grime stuck all the time, so I changed it up to earrings. For fun too, I quickly looked up expensive gemstones and found red beryl. It's a pinkish red color and thought that matched his shirt nicely. So I gave him red beryl earrings, along with a classic diamond pair, a gold stud, a gold hoop, and a 2-in-1 gold chain earrings. And hopefully altogether, he doesn't look like Santa Claus. I tried my best to make sure he didn't have all white hair, round belly, so on and so forth. But if people view him as such on their first look, that's fine. Most people would think of green nowadays when they picture a leprechaun anyway. As for making the word leprechaun, I thought it would be fun to have it all in gold coins, but that didn't fit on the image without making the coins too small. Not to mention it wouldn't be in the right proportions compared to the coins in the pot. And that probably would have been a lot more tedious work, so it's a good thing I quit that idea. So instead, I made the lettering look like gold bars. And I would have to admit, I was having fun using the sand effect brush while unmasking the gold coins in the pot. It looks so cool. Alright, and that concludes today's episode. I'll just be playing the credits for the music and then the references I used in MLA format for the remaining part of this video. I would also like to thank you guys for clicking on the video here and watching it, whether if it was the whole thing or little snippets. I really appreciate it and I hope you enjoyed. Now, I will need to go and practice drawing horses because they are known to be difficult.